all the latest on the SaWGuy podcast, be sure to subscribe and don't forget that bell icon. Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, y'all know I am the SaWGuy, and you're joining me for another Grindhouse feature on episode 49, Bordello of Blood. So as I always say, now it's frights, camera, action.
Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
I ain't no fucking clown. That is better.
Now clear your minds. He knows what scares you.
I'm just gonna bash your brains.
What the hell? The boogeyman is real, and you found him. What do you want?
I want to hear you scream.
Hell. Everybody loves popcorn.
As most of y'all know that I titled this episode The Gruesome Twosome. I call it that because Bordello of Blood is tied in with Tales from the Crypt, right? And, you know, what's interesting to note is that Bordello of Blood is another film that had no ties to Tales from the Crypt. Isn't that interesting? I'm like, what the fuck? Are you serious? So it's basically similar to how Demon Knight was. You know, the script was actually written by the writers of Back to the Future, which is just like, holy shit, really? You know? The writers were Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis. And what's crazy is that in the 70s is when they wrote this. They went to USC, the film school over there, and then as soon as they graduated and got done, they wrote the script for this. And for the longest time, they had this in their back pocket. You know, they never presented it or anything. Well, the whole story of Bordello of Blood, how it came about, was because of the fact that, you know, Robert Zemeckis, he was going to go to DreamWorks. And, you know, Universal was like, no, we don't want you to go over there, so we'll greenlight your movie Bordello of Blood, right? So they greenlit it, and, you know, we got what we have today, right? But, you know, with Bordello of Blood, a lot of people love it, but people that worked on the film, they hate it. Because they always say, even if you watch, like, you know, behind-the-scenes interviews, or if you watch, you know, the documentaries on this film, everybody will tell you, like, man, this was just so much, you know, and just constant rewrites and doing this and doing that, you know. But for what it was, you know, at the time, a lot of people didn't like it. They, you know, they gave it bad reviews. Horror fans didn't like it because they said it was over the top cheesy. But, you know, I tell everybody, time heals all wounds. And that's basically what this film was, you know. When all the time was settled and everything, this became a cult favorite. Now you see this on the Sci-Fi Channel, the USA Channel. It's one of those films they have to play all the time for Halloween because it's so cheesy and over the top and amazing because you tied in Tales from the Crypt with it. But anyways, you know, I'll break down more of this, you know, and as I explain the whole movie and everything like that, for those of you that haven't seen Bordello of Blood. Basically, this movie, I love it. There's so many different things about it. But anyways, Bordello of Blood doesn't start off like a normal episode of Tales from the Crypt, right? What I thought was interesting is that, like, when you start watching the movie, it has, you know, the Universal logo and everything, and it introduces you, and then all of a sudden, like, bam, you know, it starts right into the story. It follows, like, this little person, his name's Vincent, and he has, like, these workers with him. They're going through this rainforest and shit. They're trying to look for this cavern, or this tomb, right? So they go through, you see the machetes are chopping the trees and shit. They find the statue, and they're like, okay, let's dig under there and find it, right? So they go under there, they see this tomb, right? And so Vincent's like, okay, cut the straps. They cut the straps. Shh. And then they open it up, and he's like, I found the best thing I've been looking for. And all these workers that was with her, they were all pissed. They were like, you drove us all the way to the end of the world for a fucking stiff? You know, there's a lot of dark humor in this, too. That's what I like about it. It's so Tales from the Crypt-like, right? And anyways, you know, he tells me, he's like, well, I had to search the four corners of the world to find her heart and give it back to her, right? So he opens this little box, and it's like, you know, you know, I guess you could say it's got like sectioned off and everything on 4 different pieces of the heart. So he starts pulling like each of the little pieces, like walls out, so they start connecting, and it shows all that, and then they're freaking out, like, how the fuck are you doing that, right? Then all of a sudden, he finally gets the full heart, and he's laughing. And so he goes and puts her heart back in. He goes, here you go, baby. You know, he puts it in, and then all of a sudden you see the corpses like starting to come together, right? And all of a sudden it stops. And then he's like, bitch! He's like, it's never done that. You know, he's hitting the corpse, wake up! After that, you know, he's telling them, all right, pack her up, let's go. And then the workers get pissed, and so they pick him up. And what's crazy is that they were gonna, you know, beat the shit out of him. Then all of a sudden they start talking in Spanish, mira, mira, mira. And you start seeing like blood coming all underneath the coffin. They're like, what the fuck, right? They open up the coffin, and I love the transformation on this. It's so cheesy. It reminded me of the Hulk transformation from the 70s, which is really cool. So it shows the corpse, and it shows like, it's flashing through, and little by little more layers and layers of flesh is coming out. Then all of a sudden she wakes up, and she fucking like kills one dude. And, then she gets up, and then, the worker is like climbing up on the rope to get the fuck out. He throws another one on there. She grabs him, squeezes his head, and pops his eyeballs out. Then she tries to go after Vincent, and what I thought was badass about this, he busts out the key from Demon Knight. It's a cool little wink, because that key was supposed to be in all the films, and she tries to touch it, and he basically says the same thing like in Demon Knight, like, hey, the key in here with all this blood, it controls her. It doesn't matter where you keep it, in a pocket, in a safe, or right in her face, it controls her. And then that's what he tells her, like, hey, if I give you one more, baby, will you behave? And she's like, anything for you, lover. And then you find out that it's like a woman vampire. And then the worker's looking at him and he's like, you son of a bitch. And then freaking, she pulls out her tongue and sticks it, I don't know if it was like right in his asshole or something, but it just went like right through him. And what I thought was cool is that they didn't show it, but then it goes right into like the Tales from the Crypt. And then you hear the mummy telling the whole story. Then she rips his face off and kills him and eats him. And what I thought was cool is that fucking William Sadler, he plays the mummy. And I love the fact that William Sadler plays the mummy in this because, he was there since the start of the actual TV series. He was one of the main stars in Demon Knight, and he carried on over into Bordello of Blood, which I was like, oh, fuck, this is cool, dude. Like, awesome little winks, right? So as they're talking, he's saying that he's famous, and, he was talking shit. Like, him and the Crypt Keeper are having lunch, and then finally, he starts telling him, like, hey, this tomb isn't big enough for the both of us. He goes, you ready to have a little competition? And then the Crypt Keeper's like, you're on. So they start playing rock, paper, scissors, and each loser has to cut off a limb. Then that's when the Crypt Keeper's like, well, I'm in for a real fun treat. And then he introduces you into the story of Bordello of Blood, right? So you already have the intro of what's happened. You have the intro from the Crypt Keeper himself. Now it falls into these two other different characters. It shows the house, and it shows that she's listening to, like, I guess you could say this gospel preaching, on her Walkman, because you got to remember it's 1996 at this time, right? And she's working out, and it shows this dude, he's listening to music and he's smoking, and it shows that he's your typical 90s badass kid. He has the fucking piercings on the ear, he has the nose ring, and it shows he's blowing out smoke and he's gonna pierce his tongue, right? Well, the woman that you figure it out, they're brother and sister. The woman's name is Catherine Bordeaux, and she's played by Erica Eleniak. And a lot of people remember Erica Eleniak because, she starred in a lot of TV shows, Full House, Baywatch, and stuff like that. And then it shows that she goes up there and she's telling her brother is actually played by Corey Feldman. His name's Caleb Bordeaux, right? And so she's telling him, you need to turn down that fucking music. The whole neighborhood can hear it. He's like, well, and then he turns it back up. There's for the other half. And then she's like, you need to fucking stop it. So she turns it down again. He's like, well, I was just ready to leave. And so she starts following him and starts mouthing off to him and telling him, hey, what you need is a parole officer. You don't get into trouble, that kind of shit. And then he looks at her and he's like, fuck you. Then she's like, just be safe. And then he's telling her, because, she's all into the gospel thing and religion and everything. He's like, what, you think the Reverend's going to say I'm going to be condemned to hell, Kind of crazy how they played off on all that. But anyways, they show that he's at the bar with his buddies, and he's throwing darts, and it shows like the darts missing and everything, right? So he's there with his buddy Reggie, the one he's throwing darts at. He's there with Zeke, and they never mention the other guy's name. But anyways, they start fucking around, the typical dude thing, like, hey, $5 if you throw the dart on his nuts. And then Reggie's like, no, I got 6. Then Zeke is busted out, he's like, well, I'll give you $10 if you do. And then Reggie's like, no, I got 16. He's like, all right, boys, can you beat that? All right. And it shows that he gets the dart, and he's gonna throw it like right on him. And, then it shows that he goes and throws it right on his nuts, and he's like, oh, son of a bitch. He pulls it out, he goes, hey, sorry, man, I missed. And then they go and they have the beers, and he's like, well, look at it this way, man, they're paying for the beers. Typical dude stuff. We all have done it once or twice in our life, right? Then all of a sudden, they bring the beers, and then the waitress is like, hey, I wish you guys would stop playing that game and get late already. And then he's like, hey, that's a good thing that you're talking like that, Luis. Why don't you come over here and let me break off a piece? And I thought this was funny because she looked at him. She's like, you're a little young for me, honey. Come back when you got some hair on your nuts. I was like, oh, shit. There was a lot of dark humor in this, and I fucking loved it, right? So anyways, they start cheering with their beers and shit. Here's to getting laid sooner than later, right? Then they meet this weird motherfucker. This guy, his name's Jenkins. He comes up and he does the same thing. Here's to getting laid sooner than later. And then that's when he starts talking about, the place where to go to get laid. He tells them basically, I know a place not too far from here where you can get the best goddamn piece of ass you've ever had. And, his buddy Zeke is like, man, this guy's fucking tweaking out. He's like, fuck off, dude. Then he grabs Zeke and he pulls him right up close to his face and he says, I'm talking about getting fucked so good you might crawl in 3 days. Then he gives him the address, 325 Beaumont. Ask for the Cunningham Wake. And then he walks away. And, the typical dude that Zeke was, he's like, yeah, you better run, you bug-eyed motherfucker. I'll kick his ass. Then you see Caleb. And he's like, where you guys going? He's like, well, we're going to go get laid. Follow that place. They're all like, man, that guy's fucking nuts, dude. Don't do that. So it shows that it's Caleb and Reggie. They're driving in the car. They're going to this place at 325 Beaumont, which is basically, I guess you could say, like a mortuary house, kind of. That's where they do all, like, the mortician work and everything. They do the services and shit. And so when they pull up, they're all like, man, there's all these cars. Is somebody having a party? And Caleb, he was basically like, I don't know, man, but if one member of the Addams family opens the door, I'm fucking out. So they get to the door, they knock on it, right? They see the mortician there. His name is McCutcheon, right? And so, he's like, can I help you boys? And he's proper Englishman, right? And he's like, nope, bye. And he's like, you're here for the Cunningham Wake. Come on in. And what I thought was funny, this is a thing that I picked up on. Corey Feldman's character, Caleb, was a badass. He was smoking a cigarette. He walked in, he blows the smoke on him, right? His other pal, Reggie's supposed to be a badass like him, wearing earrings and shit. As he's going in, he's very polite, and then he's like, excuse me. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, we all been there, right? Everybody has that one friend. And so that's where, he leads them up to this coffin. And he's like, come on, boys, chop, chop. And they try to leave. And then all of a sudden, that's when he pulls out a gun. And he's like, I don't think so. Get in the coffin. So he tells them to get in the coffin, and then he's fucking with them. Because they're two dudes, like, trying to get in. He's like, oh, you guys make such a nice couple. Just fucking with them or whatever. He closes the coffin, and he says, you'll love the girls. Pulls on the lever. And basically, they're in a coffin, and it looks like they're going to go and become, like, cremated. Like, that kind of thing. So they go down this conveyor. They're screaming, ah! They get down at the end, it stops. And then all of a sudden, this chick opens it up, and the first thing you see there is a pair of tits, and then it goes up to her face, and it says, hey, boys, we've been waiting for you. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck? This is a weird twist to this, right? So all of a sudden, they get out, and then all of a sudden, they see this one chick that comes up to Reggie first, and she's like, hey, you want to go on this ride over here? And then he's like, well, how do I get a ticket? She's like, you already got one. And fucking Caleb's like, well, he's got, a small ticket. It's a short ride. And fucking Reggie, he's looking at it, he's like, it's still a ticket, man. It's just the dark humor alone is just fucking funny in this. A lot of people will actually tell you that this is more comedy than it is horror. But honestly, I see the both elements of it. It's dark humor. It's not your typical run-of-the-mill comedy. And so anyways, as he's walking away, Caleb tells Reggie, he's like, hey, man, kill her. It's implied that they're both virgins, which is crazy, And then all of a sudden, he sees this other chick. She comes up and she's like, hey, I like it dirty and I like it fast. So it shows that Reggie's going away and Caleb, he gets to this chick. Reggie's making out with this other chick, she pulls off her top and everything, and then she starts making out with him. And then she, cuts his chest with her nail, and then he's like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Like, obviously you can tell he's not into it. And then she's like, well, I want everything, including your blood. And all of a sudden, that's where you see the vampire from the beginning. You find out her name is Lilith, and it's like, oh shit, okay, so I see what's going on here. This is a vampire brothel. So she comes in, and she says, well, she works you up, and I finish you off. You like a little tongue action? He's like, yeah. And so they start making out. And then she puts her tongue down through his throat, and then she pushes his fucking heart out through his chest, and it was like, oh shit! Because you don't expect it, and it's over the top gore. It's fucking amazing. Then she grabs his heart, and then basically what she says after that, she goes, don't eat your heart out, baby. That's my job. And then she bites the fucking heart. It's like squirting out blood and everything. I was like, oh shit! You didn't expect that. Then it goes back to Caleb, and it shows how he's making out with the chick. And I thought it was pretty cool, is that they show that she had a little something extra. If you've seen the original Total Recall, y'all know what I'm talking about, dudes. And so anyways, they start making out and stuff like that. And then that's when he tries to talk to her. Lilith comes in, and she's like, well, my girls know not to talk with a mouthful. And he's like, whoa, 2 chicks. It's the stereotypical dude thing. I mean, it was the 90s, right? And all of a sudden, that's where she's like, so, you like a little foreplay? Or she said something along those lines. And all of a sudden, it shows her walking up, then it blacks out. And then it shows, Catherine, she's at the police station talking to the sheriff. She's like, hey, he's been missing for at least, many, many days. Is there anything you could do? And the cops are just like, we can't do anything. I mean, there's like 10 other cases on here. I mean, we'll get to you when we get to you. And, and it's sad because, I mean, most police stations, they're, I hate to say it, but I mean, some police stations, they have to do that. I mean, if there's like so much shit going on. And so she's all disappointed and everything. And that's when you meet the other character, who's played by Dennis Miller. He plays a character named Rafe Gutman. And out of all things, I mean, a lot of people are like, Dennis Miller? Like the comedian? Yeah, he was in this film. A lot of stories about him that kind of made this film a lot difficult for everybody to work with. It's because, they basically worked around his schedule, and they paid him a shit ton of money to be there, They paid him, this movie I think had a budget of, roughly $13 million. And what they did is that they gave like 1.2 or 1.3 million to Dennis Miller to be in this film. And with Dennis Miller, he was just like, yeah, I'm in this film, and then he's doing his HBO show at the time because it was mid-90s. He does stand-up comedy. And, he doesn't have any acting experience, so this is his first actual film that he, started, which I thought was okay, I'll explain a little bit more into this, but back to the story, is, he sees Catherine, and then he was like, oh, well, I feel sorry for you, I can help you if you want, unless you want the A-team to go ahead and help you out, and then they start talking a little bit more, and then he starts, saying, hey, have I met you somewhere before? She's like, no. So he's like, okay, come to my office. She's like, where's your office? He basically rents out this old movie theater, and he has it as his office, right? And they start talking and everything. So he gets a picture, and then he's asking her about, does he have any friends or anything that he can go and get in contact and find him down? And then all of a sudden his ex-wife calls, and then they start bickering on the phone. He's like, yeah, now I know why you almost drove me to the brink of homosexuality. Like, a lot of his lines, what's crazy, for Dennis Miller, he improv'd all the shit out of it. And they had to rewrite the whole movie as they went along because of his improv. Some of it was so good, and other ones were just like head scratches where they're like, that has nothing to do with the script, but they kept it all in. They had to work all around it because, he didn't want to do reshoots and stuff like that. That's the myth, and that's what was said, on documentaries and stuff like that. But anyways, he's arguing with his wife, and then all of a sudden you see Catherine. She's looking around, and she sees this collection of, smut stuff, like pornography pictures and, random shit, like posters. And, well, anyway, she looks at this one that says Chubby O'Toole, and she's like, ugh, sick. And what's crazy is that there was a meaning behind that. There was a meaning that Catherine's character, played by Erica Eleniak, she was going to play a former porn star named Chubby O'Toole. She used to be big and fat, then she goes through, the fat surgery and stuff like that, and gets skinny and hot. Well, the day before, the shooting was supposed to start, it's rumored that they, she called up last minute and said, hey, change the script, I want to be taken seriously. And the writers were like, what? You come off of Baywatch, you want to do a horror film, they didn't get it, right? And so anyways, they said, what do you want us to do? They basically had to rewrite the story because she didn't want to play a former porn star. That was in the original script. So they basically redid it, and they did the script so that way she works, for a church ministry, right? So that's where you see the Chubby O'Toole. What I thought was interesting is that they kept it in there, which I get it, it could show that he's a smut and everything like that, but to actually have it there that long where it says Chubby O'Toole, it's like, oh man, the potential they would have had in the story. But either way, I mean, we still got a great story regardless, right? So anyway, she sees that and she starts walking away. And he's like, no, hey, I want to help you. And then she's like, don't worry, I'll pay you for your time. He's like, I don't want to be paid for my time. I want to be paid to help. So then it shows, he goes into the bar where they were all hanging out that night. And he sees Zeke playing, and Zeke's, he's playing pool, thinking he's all cool and everything like that. And then he's all talking to this chick, he's like, hey, I'm going to win this for you, baby. So he goes in there and he tries to talk to Zeke. And Zeke is just blowing him off. He's like, here's my card, Rafe Gutman. I'm a private investigator. I'm trying to see if you know somebody by the name of Caleb. He's like, I don't know anybody by the name of Caleb. Rafe. And then he rips up his card, puts it back in his pocket. He's like, you sure you're going to do that, man? You're gonna pop that cue. And sure enough, he does that. But then all of a sudden, he starts asking him more questions. And he's like, fuck off, man. The other guy that was there with them, he was kind of like, I guess you could say the Tales from the Crypt, stereotypical character. He's just laughing, just being stupid. And then he's like, all I know is that they left, him and Reggie, and they never came back. The other guy was like, they went to a whorehouse. And he's like, hey, you got an address on that whorehouse, buddy? He's like, well, and he's scratching his head. Oh, and then he remembered the crazy guy, Jenkins, and he's like, 3:25, Beaumont. You know, and then he's like, all right, cool, now that I got that. And then he stayed to see, you know, Zeke fuck up his shot and everything, and Zeke's like, hey man, let's go outside. And I thought this was one of the best lines that, you know, Dennis Miller had improv in there for his character, Rafe Gutman. He was like, no, sorry Zeke, I'm just not in the mood for a blowjob. Catch you later, kids. I was like, oh shit! You know, it was very graphic, a lot of sexual content in this film. Obviously, you don't see much of it. I mean, you see from parts here and there, but I mean, there's a lot of, like, dialogue that had to do with that. So anyways, it shows Rafe Gutman gets in his car, he goes into the mortuary place, and they're doing a funeral service. So he sees, you know, McCutcheon, he's over there, you know, saying the prayers and stuff like that. Then you see Jenkins, he's right there pouring hella sunblock, and he's like, God damn, why do they have the fucking lights on? They don't need it this bright. And he's like tripping out and everything. And you see Rafe Gutman, he's just like, you know, what the hell? Like, he's scoping everything out, right? Then after that, you know, he leaves, and then it shows, you know, it shows Catherine's side of things, right? It shows that this is what I thought was funny. This is one of his best roles, I think he did. It showed Chris Sarandon. He's the head of the church. The church is called Current Ministry Church, right? And his name is Jimmy Current. So it's basically his church, right? It shows the signs and people going in, and then that's when he's, you know, talking about, like, his prayers and his sermon and all that stuff, where he's like, the apocalypse is coming, so be ready. Yes, be ready. You know, then he sees the teleprompter is like all messed up. He keeps repeating, yes, it's coming. You know, and then you know, it shows how he plays music, and it's funny because he's playing a guitar. He's not even playing it. His band is like playing in the background. He's just going with it, right? And then he's like, let me hear you say praise him. And then everyone's like doing it, glory, glory. And then it ends, right? After that, you know, he goes and talks to Catherine. Then you find out that Catherine is basically his right-hand man, right? And so she's talking about plans and everything. The biggest twist in this, you see that little guy from the beginning, you see Vincent, he's like, hey, I got plans to talk about the constructions. And then, you know, JC, that's what they called him. They didn't call him by Jimmy. They didn't call him by, you know, Reverend Current. They said, you know, JC. I guess they called it short. But I thought was pretty funny is that they used JC, which is an abbreviation for Jimmy Carter and Jesus Christ. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I mean, that's what I got off of it. So I was like, oh shit, okay. So anyways, they're talking, and then all of a sudden, Rafe Gutman comes in. He's like, hey, Catherine, let me talk to you. You know, Jimmy, he tries to, you know, the Reverend, he tries, you know, to snoop in. He's like, have you found her brother yet? And he's like, well, I'm on her dive, not yours, Reverend. So he walks away, you know, being, I guess you could say, all godlike. That's what, you know, Rafe Gutman said. Well, he's just radiant with godlike, doesn't he? So he basically tells her, like, so they went to a whorehouse. I'm going to go check it out. She's like, no, don't bother. I don't want to know where it's at. After all that dialogue goes in, then it shows Rafe. He's back at the bar, and he's talking about how hot she is. He's like, man, all the hot ones are always crazy. He's talking to the bartender. And he said something about sex, right? And then at the end of the bar, that's where you see Jenkins again, the crazy guy. And you know, he's eating raw-ass meat. And then he's like, sex! You're looking for sex! I can tell you where to get the best goddamn piece of ass you've ever had. You know? So Dennis Miller, or Rafe, he's telling him, he's like, damn, you want to put a big lighter on that? That shit's still moving. And then that's when he tells her, 325 Beaumont. Ask for the Cunningham. Wake! So he's like, all right, I'm there. So now he has a lead of where, you know, the whole whorehouse thing is going on, right? So he goes to the house. He goes to the house, and then, you know, he knocks on it, and then he's like, hey, I'm here for the Cunningham wake. And then, you know, McCutcheon, he was like, you know, trying to dissect somebody and do all the mortuary things, expel the gas. Medical nerd like me, you know, I thought was crazy is that they actually showed the sounds where he cuts it and all the gases dispel, which is true, which I thought was a cool, another little wink. But anyways, as he's talking to Rafe, you know, he's like, it's closed, come back tomorrow. And then, you know, he's basically like, well, if I don't, like, express myself now, like, 2 or 3 times, I don't know if I'll be able to express myself at all. He's like, go do it in the corner over there with a box of tissues. Then he closed the door on him, which I thought was crazy, right? So they were actually closed. So Rafe Gutman, he gets in there and he starts snooping around on things. And at the same time, you see Lilith, she's interviewing another girl. And I guess it's implied that they interview girls and then they turn them into vampires. So Rafe Gutman, he finds out about everything, then he leaves. And then basically it kind of builds up more into the story of like, okay, what's going on? Is it vampires? Is it vampires? We know as audience, but they don't know, right? And so anyways, that's where it kind of goes into the fact of like, now you see Vincent and then you see, well, it shows the dialogue of Vincent talking to Lilith and she's like, hey, let's see what's going on with things here, you know? Let's see if you could talk to the Reverend about cutting him out, right? now it's implied that the Reverend is in control over this. You know, he was the one who set out Vincent to go get Lilith back to kill people for the sins, right? He's doing the Lord's work, which to me, I really like that whole concept of it because it reminds me a lot like Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet had the Reverend as the werewolf who's killing people for their sins. It was crazy. I was like, oh shit, this is a really cool wink, right? So anyways, next day comes around, and then, you know, he eventually comes in, you know, and he goes there with the biker because the biker's all pissed off, right? And it shows that him and the biker are trying to get in. It's like the next day, and he's like, well, I only have room for one. So that's when he brings in Rafe, and then he sends Rafe in there on the coffin down the road, and then he pulls Jenkins to the side, and he's like, hey, wait a second. He's like, hey, wait right here, you know? So as Rafe goes down there, you know, he does the same thing Caleb does. Goes in there, he wakes up, and he sees that it's a whorehouse and everything like that. This chick named Tammy, she goes and picks him up, and they go to their room. And as that's going on, then all of a sudden, you know, like I guess you could say he improvised a lot of his lines. It didn't explain much other than the fact that, like, you know, he kind of set her up on this, like, S&M, like, contraption. And after he locked her up, he's like, sorry, Tammy, I gotta go. And she's like, you bastard! And as he's running, he dropped his wallet. And then he leaves, you know. Before he leaves is, you know, then you see the dialogue with Lilith come in. She starts talking to Jenkins, and Jenkins like, hey, I don't want to be a vampire anymore. She's like, well, you haven't transformed all the way. He's like, but it hurts. So she's like, oh, and then it looks like she's gonna give him a kiss, and she grabs his head and fucking rips it off. I was like, oh shit! Like, you don't expect that, right? So all of a sudden, you know, Rafe Gutman, when he leaves, he goes back, and, you know, he's back at his place at the movie theater. And then all of a sudden, that's where Lilith is like, hey, you shouldn't leave a girl hanging. He has his gun ready to go, half cocked. And I guess you could say she kind of compels him. She's like, well, I could be anything that you want. And she's being nice to him because, you know, the little bit of blood that Tammy got on her, she was like, oh my god, his blood type is rare. I haven't had that since, you know, Ivan the Terrible. And, you know, so that's why she wants to keep him alive, right? She wants to try and drain his blood whenever she can. And so as she's talking to him and everything like that, Catherine comes in and she's like, oh shit, you're busy. And she's like, I'm going to the fucking cops. Then it shows that they're at the cop station, you know, at the sheriff. And they start telling everything. The cop is just sitting there eating his cans of beans and shit. And then he's like, well, your license was revoked. He's like, dude, there's people fucking dying, man. Go check it out. So they go and check it out. And they have everything all closed up at this point. And they made it look like Rafe Gutman was crazy, right? So they, I guess you could say it was kind of gaslighting. So then he's all telling McCutcheon, he's like, this is a bunch of bullshit. You know, this is all bullshit. And McCutcheon's like, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You were outside making out with two chicks. And he's like, you're a goddamn liar. And Catherine steps on him. And basically it's like, you know, they build up this whole dialogue that now Rafe Gutman looks crazy. And then all of a sudden, that's where it goes into Jimmy and Vincent. They're starting talking more about where he's like, hey, can I make some money off of this? I mean, we sell the cars and da-da-da. He's like, brother Vincent, you doing this for the Lord, right? And then Catherine comes in and says she wants to make a documentary about porn and why people are addicted to it and stuff like that, right? So then, I guess, you know, Vincent, he takes the key, and then all of a sudden, you know, now they're all flipping out like, oh, fuck. So Jimmy, the Reverend, I guess you could say JC, you know, he's all freaking out about it like, fuck, he has the key? So he goes and finds out that they're at some local strip bar. They go to the strip bar, and while they're there, you know, that's where, you know, he's telling Vincent, give me the key. You can't send this she-devil back. You know, he's like, I didn't bring you back over here to do your own thing and your own feeding. You're supposed to be doing the Lord's work. And then all of a sudden, that's when Catherine comes in. They're like, oh, shit. So they run out. And then all of a sudden, Catherine sees that chick. She's like, man, you get around a lot. You know, she's telling Lilith. And Lilith is like, yeah. You know, then they shut down the camera and everything like that. And then they show Jimmy, he's chasing Vincent outside. Then all of a sudden, it shows Lilith. She grabs him. And then he's like, you know, give me the key. And Vincent, what he does, he throws the key to the wall and breaks it. And then now she's completely free to do whatever she wants. And, you know, he was like, you know, are you going to kill the Reverend? She's like, fuck no. I'm going to let him live to see what I do, right? So now it builds up to this whole story of everything. And then that's when, you know, Rafe Gutman, he basically finally gets Catherine on his side. Where she's like, okay, I know what's going on. Something's odd because when I filmed Lilith, like, there's no reflection, right? And then you can see JC in the background. And then all of a sudden, Caleb calls her and says, hey, meet me at this abandoned warehouse. And they're all like, what? What the fuck? So they go to meet Caleb, and then Caleb, he's like full-on transformed into like a vampire. And then Rafe Gutman shoots him, you know, does all that shit. And all of a sudden, he's like, that's not your brother. And then all of a sudden, he wakes up, and he's like, I'll always be your brother, sis. He's like, Catherine, run from your brother. And they start trying to run. And then all of a sudden, Caleb's chasing them, taking his time. And then, as they're going through, she's like, all right, fuck that. We got to get around the other side. He's like, that's the craziest fucking thing. And then he's running up the ladder. And all of a sudden he sees Caleb. He's like, hi, dickhead. That's the second craziest fucking thing. It's dark humor, right? So she swings across. And then all of a sudden he grabs the chain. He swings across and he goes through on the window and then lands on the sheriff. It shows that McCutcheon and Caleb, they kidnapped, Catherine. And then all of a sudden, Rafe, he wakes up in a hospital, belly down, and he's tied down. He's telling the sheriff, what the fuck? You gotta get me out. The nurse comes in, and you find out it's Nurse Tamra, the one that he left up, hanging. And all of a sudden, she kills the sheriff and everything. He finally breaks out of his shackles and shit. And all of a sudden, she tries to get after him, and then he pushes her by the sunlight. I guess you could say her nurse outfit kind of ripped. The sunlight hit her skin, and then she blew up. Then fucking Whoopi Goldberg's in this film. Whoopi Goldberg's like, hey, can you quiet it down? I'm trying to sleep here. Should have took that damn private room. So now it builds up this whole thing where it's like gonna have this huge climax at the end, right? And all of a sudden, Rafe Gutman, he just has enough of it. He gets super soakers filled up with holy water and everything. And before he comes, the Reverend comes in and says, hey, I want to talk to Lilith. I'm gonna join you guys. And then, then you see Vincent. He's like, I'll tell her. He's like, well, I want to tell her in person. He's like, I know you better than that. And he has a gun pointed at him. Rafe is coming full force, and all of a sudden McCutcheon's like looking through the window, or through the peephole in the door. And he's like, oh shit! So Rafe runs his ass down, and it's implied that he also ran down Vincent, because you don't see Vincent after this, right? And he sees the Reverend, and the Reverend's like, he's like, come on, I'm getting a little jumpy. Are you friend or foe? He's like, well, I did start it, but I come to end it. And he pulls out like his jacket, and he has all these stakes and everything. He's like, all right, let's go. While this is going on, Lilith, she hears everything. She's like, shit! Because it's her and Caleb. They're trying to convert Catherine into a vampire, but they never do, right? So they get in, they go through the conveyor and everything. They come out, they start doing the super soaker thing, and shooting everybody with the holy water. And it's playing Ballroom Blitz in the background, which I thought was kind of cool. Ballroom Blitz! Ballroom Blitz! And it was pretty cool, It showed how, the vampires were blowing up, and how this one that was, all half, cut up and shit, and she's dragging, she looks at the Reverend, he's all freaking out and everything. And all of a sudden, he goes after to try to look for Catherine. And that's when Caleb comes after him. And then he shoots Caleb, and then Caleb, he has a big old hole holding this axe. He's like, ugh, this sucks. He dies. He grabs the axe, and as JC goes in there and finds Catherine, then all of a sudden he starts unbreaking the shackles and stuff. And then he's like, well, sorry if I touch you over there. I don't mean to touch you over there. And then she's like, yeah, it's okay. You can touch me anywhere you want. It ends up being Lilith. Then all of a sudden, he tries to stab her with the stake. She breaks his hand and then puts it right on him. And then pushes him back. And then all of a sudden, Rafe comes out, chops her up with a fucking axe. And then she's like, oh! And then she, pulls herself back up. She's like, fuck you! And disappears. And all of a sudden, they see Catherine underneath all this S&M shit. And, he's looking all over to see if she's been bitten. She hasn't been bitten, right? And all of a sudden, they're talking to JC, and JC's like, get back to the ministry, broadcast it, and then he dies, right? Which I was like, fuck! Chris Sarandon's one of my favorite roles that he did in this film, right? So anyways, they go back to the ministry, right? And then they start getting ready to broadcast and everything. It's late night. They ask the other guy who works behind the scenes, like, hey, set everything up. He's like, I can, but I can't hear you. Like, now I can hear you. And all of a sudden, it shows that he gets pulled back and blood splatters on the fucking screen because Lilith is there now, right? And so before she could broadcast, all of a sudden, Lilith comes up right behind Rafe. He tries to punch her. She's like, ooh, strong for a little man. And then they start having a scuffle, and she handcuffs him. While he's handcuffed, he flips over and tries to turn on this laser thing that they have, right? And all of a sudden, she starts fighting with Catherine, and she's like, I'd never killed a woman before, but I'm gonna like this. And then, they had back and forth, and she's like, the best you could ask for is for a charity fuck, and tries to hit her with a guitar and shit. And that's when Rafe Gutman kicks the laser on. And it's implied that the only way to kill Lilith is to split up her heart in 4 different pieces. So they shoot the laser, and it's like a cross, and it goes through her back. And then, she turns around and says, well, you could take my heart out, but you have to rip it out into 4 pieces. So as she's walking towards him, she's like, we're done, we're through. And slowly she starts transforming, little by little, from more human-like to more creature-like. And then she's like, I'm gonna rip off your dick and smash your balls into guacamole. And as she's gonna go and kill Rafe, and you see Catherine, she puts like this pitchfork right through her, splits her heart up into 4 different pieces, and she dies, right? And it's also implied that Rafe, he's Jewish, you know, because when he was on that S&M thing with Tammy, he basically, like, she was freaking out because she thought he had a cross, but it was actually, you know, the Star of David. So they implied, obviously, he was Jewish. So they're back over there at the mortuary house, and then, you know, the rabbi, he basically said a prayer and said, you know, oh, this has already been done. It's cleared. It's clean, you know. So as they walk out, it's Catherine and him. Catherine's kind of already warmed up to him. He opens the door. They're sitting in the car. She gives him the pieces of the heart. He's like, I know somebody at NASA that's going to throw this thing into fucking space. You know, and then they start talking, and then they start kind of making out. And he's like, hey, wait a minute. What's that perfume wearing? She's like, it's not perfume, it's sunblock. And then it shows that he lifts up her skirt. She was fucking bitten, so she was a vampire. And then it shows her teeth pop out, she bites his head, and that's the end of the movie. And I was like, oh, fuck. You know, like, you don't expect that. You really don't, you know? And all of a sudden, it shows the Crypt Keeper, and he's talking about, well, kids and boils and ghouls, you know, the Crypt Keeper has survived. And then it shows, you know, the mummy, he's all, like, dismembered and shit, and you see his head, like, in a basket. He's like, come on. Best 2 out of 3. He's like, quit while you're ahead, buddy. And then it ends. And then it ends like how it normally would on the TV show, where everything's all pulling back and everything. You see the credits. And it was a great fucking film overall, you know. Personally, for me, I've always enjoyed it. I loved it since I first saw it, you know. But like I said, a lot of people behind the scenes didn't like it. You can watch all the documentaries and everything on it. Scream Factory actually re-released this, you know, back in 2015. And they did this full-on documentary, really good documentary, talking about how they built the movie, right? And a lot of people really didn't like this film that worked on it because, you know, Corey Feldman, he came out and said that he tried to be chill with everybody and all this stuff and try to get everybody all involved. You know, Dennis Miller was doing his own thing. Everybody had this misconception about Angie Everhart, you know, the girl who played Lilith. They said, you know, because at the time she was dating Sylvester Stallone, and everybody thought that she got the job because of it. And, you know, she came out in the documentary and said, well, yeah, I was dating the guy. He helped me get my foot in the door. But, you know, she goes, I had to do all the casting and acting and everything. And she had no acting experience. But for her first acting role, it was amazing, you know. She was a supermodel. And what I thought was cool about her is that she was the first redhead supermodel to become, like, really famous, you know. And, like, the fact that she was in that movie was just like, oh, shit. Because in the 90s, they had this trend where, you know, when Cindy Crawford started in a movie, they said, okay, the next big thing is supermodels in the movies, right? And that's how it started with Angie Everhart. But for what she did, she was amazing in that. You know, I give her all the credit in the world. And, you know, everybody, they all said that, they're like, yeah, you got to be nice to her because, you know, she's mean, she's this, she's that, and that's Stallone's girl. And, you know, Corey Feldman, he came out and said she was a sweetheart. You know, they all got to hang out and everything. Erica Eleniak, you know, they said that she was doing a lot of stuff, so she didn't interact with the cast as much and things like that. And, you know, the crew members, they filmed this movie actually in Vancouver because the director, he didn't like the whole union thing and how he got screwed over by the union in LA. So as a middle finger to them, he said, okay, we're going to shoot in Vancouver. And they were supposed to work Monday through Friday, but that didn't work out because of Dennis Miller's schedule. So they would work all week and only have like Monday and Tuesday off. Like, everyone's like, who the fuck wants Monday and Tuesday off? I would like to have Monday and Tuesday off, but I don't mind. But I mean, you know, in the industry, it's a different ballgame, you know? And what I also thought was interesting on this is that before they decided to do Bordello of Blood, this fact blew my mind. Like, wow. Before they were going to put Tales from the Crypt on Bordello of Blood, Tales from the Crypt, the next movie, was going to be dead easy, but then, you know, they kind of said, okay, well, that'll be the third one, right? So when they decided on the second one before Bordello of Blood, they said they were going to either do The Frighteners from Peter Jackson, or they were going to do From Dusk Till Dawn. And it was like, whoa, what the hell? Like, I can see both of those films being a Tales from the Crypt film. Like, imagine how different that shit would be. Like, whoa, From Dusk Till Dawn. Like, have that be a Tales from the Crypt film. That would have been just amazing. Even The Frighteners, if you've never seen any of those two films, they're both great, good films. You know, I enjoy the hell out of them. You should check them out if you ever get a chance to. You know, those ones are really good too. But I thought it was pretty cool how they did that. And like I said, this film was not given that much of a budget. They gave $13 million, and a good chunk of it, I guess you could say like almost 10% of it, all went to Dennis Miller. And a lot of people were pissed off because they're like, hey, you know, like, you got paid a lot of good money to be in this film. We all got paid like next to scratch because we love doing this, you know. We love doing horror films. And that's what I thought was pretty cool, is that Corey Feldman, he made that point across, that like, hey, it was such a low budget film, but they loved doing it and they wanted to do it, you know. For what it was, I know a lot of people at the time when it came out, they bashed it, they didn't like it. All the critics said the same thing about like Demon Knight, where they're like, well, if you're a horny teenage boy, you would like this, you know. But the film never got the credit that it deserved until recently, around like 2013, 14, when there was this, you know, whole resurgence of Tales from the Crypt coming out, right? And I thought it was pretty interesting on it. I really did, you know. And then the fact that they had to keep changing the script for everybody, you know. Dennis Miller, he improvised a lot of his lines, you know. Erica Laniak, she didn't want to play the Chubby O'Toole character, and then, you know, she said that they tried to add in extra scenes where it got like more sexual content between her and Angie. Ooh, it's one of those things that everybody would say that it's like production hell, you know, because as they're going along, they had to change it as they went along. So they rewrote the whole movie on the fly. But like I said, what we got was still amazing. You know, I would still watch this film all day. It's a fun, campy movie. It's classic B-rate. Who doesn't love B-rate, right? And it is, especially, you know, in the 90s. I mean, it was just fucking amazing for what it was, you know? But I thought was interesting, too, is that the original people that they had in mind to play in there, they wanted to have Daniel Baldwin and they wanted to have Robin Givens play the main character. So Daniel Baldwin, he would play Rafe Gutman. Then you would have Robin Givens, and they would have Robin Givens play Lilith, which would have been cool, but they said they didn't want to go with Robin Givens because at the time she was supposedly difficult to work with, and at the time she was dating Mike Tyson, so everybody was all worried about Mike Tyson. I don't know why, but you know, for overall, I mean, this film was really cool, and you know, like I said, I suggest that you guys look up the documentary, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on the actual, you know, Screen Factory release, if you can find it, because I know that's kind of a rare gem to find. I know I tried to look for it up and try to find that thing, you know, for this episode. It was crazy. But anyways, if you watch the documentary, it's amazing. Like, they go in all detail about how everything was from the first day to the end of the shooting. The makeup effects was great. The only thing is, a lot of people, they kind of bashed on it because they said, oh, the makeup's could have been better, they didn't have a better character, and this and this and that. But I mean, they had a fresh new crew that basically did this, and for what they did, it was fucking amazing. They didn't even need a lot. You know, and then the thing I love about this film, it reminds me of like the Greek mythologies, you know? You have the women are like sirens, and it showed like a lot of women empowerment. Like, they were the boss, they were the crazy ones. No, well, not the crazy ones, but I would say they were the ones in control. They were like, you know, like I said, it's basically like Greek mythology. They were the sirens that brought the people in and took over it. So, I mean, there's a lot of little weird, like, connections you can see in this. Like, you know, the Reverend's character, Chris Sarandon's character, they called him JC. I always thought, okay, JC, because it's like a play on the whole, like, Jesus Christ or Jimmy Carter kind of thing, you know? That's why I was like, that's kind of weird how they did that. You know, I don't know if all that's implied. I mean, that's purely my opinion. But I mean, honestly, like, it's not hard to notice that. Like, I picked up on it, like, whoa, this is pretty cool. But, I mean, for what this film was, if you've never seen Bordello of Blood, check it out. You will not be disappointed. Trust me. Classic B-rate, modern, I guess you could say it's a modern B-rate. Because I know this basically, like, you know, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad with this film. It really is, you know? Because if you look at it, like, this film, because a lot of people didn't like it, it basically killed anything else with Tales from the Crypt. After this movie came out in 1996, Tales from the Crypt slowly ended, like the TV show. Then they did another movie that a lot of people really don't count because the Crypt Keeper wasn't really involved in that one. That was called The Spiritual. But these two are the main ones that defined Tales from the Crypt, the series. And because this movie came out, it basically, you know, little by little, it kind of deteriorated the TV show. But like I said, it's coming back in a big way. 90s are the thing now, and this is a great film. If you guys haven't seen it, like I said, go out there, watch it. Like, you will not be disappointed, like, hands down. But anyways, guys, thank y'all for tuning in, and as always, I'll catch y'all next time.